Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking all things Lady Gaga with all of her new releases that we have from her, in particular, her most recent, her big comeback single for LG7, Disease. I'm very excited to talk about that song, but there's a lot to talk about beyond just this big lead single. Gaga has had quite a whirlwind last couple of months, and there's a lot to talk about. So I wanted to sort of wind the clock back first. And if you're interested in only hearing my thoughts on Disease, I'll have a picture here showing what I'm talking about, so you can skip to that part in the, little drag at the bottom to see where, I get to that section. Because I feel like recapping the last like 4 months, she's been doing so much. And it's a real period after a drought because she'd been quite quiet for some time. So let's go through this. And actually, we go technically all the way back to the Olympics because at the Olympics she had her performance of Mon Truc en Plumes, my thing with feathers, a song by Zizi Jean-Marie, Zizi Jean-Mer, and it was a very French performance, very much full of feathers, full of joie de vivre, and I expect nothing less from a student of that school of artistry in Gaga. I really enjoyed the performance, even if it's not really my kind of music. And then, of course, she teases LG7 on a balcony. You can barely hear anything. I couldn't really make out any of the audio because of the people screaming. And it was also ambient audio, so it was hard to hear. It wasn't very good quality, the sources of people recording what she was playing. But of course, this got people so excited. And of course, everyone, and at this point, if you follow me on Twitter, you might know that I was constantly sort of being, trying to temper Little Monster's excitement by saying, listen, I don't think LG7 is happening this year. I think this year is all going to be about Joker 2. And at the time of the Olympics, we did not have that little schedule that she had posted, which I think she posted around the time of the Venice premiere, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe a little after. I can't exactly remember when that was posted. I think it was early September, where she actually broke down her schedule for this fall. And that was what gave us confirmation that, the lead single off of LG7 was going to be happening this year, even though the album, as I predicted, would come in 2025. I had always, if you followed my channel, I always felt that LG7 would come in 2025. I didn't think that she would want to put it the same year as Joker 2. If she had, it would have come out back this winter or spring. It was getting too close as we got into the summer. I thought, there's no album. It's not coming until maybe winter of 2025 at the earliest. And apparently, February is the supposed month that it will be coming. So not that far from now, about 4 months. So I'm starting to get very excited. Obviously, we did get this lead single as she promised. But the Olympics was a nice little tease. So then we had Die with a Smile. And honestly, her release of this when Joker was premiering at Venice, it was a little bit like, what's going on with the timeline here? We've got, the Joker soundtrack coming up. We've obviously got the movie coming up. But this isn't for LG7, but this isn't also for Bruno Mars's upcoming album. This is just a collab that the two of them wanted to make. As of right now, I do believe that this is a standalone single, that Die with a Smile, the song that was released at the end of August, is just a collab between the two artists. They just were like, hey, you're nearby. I'm here at this studio, want to stop over and, give the wine mom something to play in the car and play on, play in supermarkets till the end of time. Let's do it. If I had to compare, a similar sounding song, Hold My Hand from the Top Gun Maverick soundtrack, I definitely say Die with a Smile is a much stronger song, just in terms of the melody and, I don't know, something about their duet together. Their voices gel so well together that I just think there's a little bit more of a timeless quality to the melody of Die with a Smile. But I think Die with a Smile would have been a perfect song for Joker because, the whole idea of dying with a smile is very much, kind of the theme of Joker. It's like playing with that distorted clown makeup. And so I was a little surprised that it wasn't tied into that at all. I mean, I think Gaga sort of felt that it was themed loosely anyway, so why not put it out around this season? But boy, for her to put out, this big single, the Harlequin album, and the Joker 2 soundtrack, which she's featured on, and Disease, all within the span. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I think that she maybe was trying to insulate, potentially against the bad critical and commercial response of Joker 2. I definitely think that, Harlequin might have been an afterthought of an idea when she realized maybe this movie on its own isn't going to do what I'd like it to do. And so let's try and distract with other things around it. And so maybe that's why Die with a Smile coming out when it did was probably a good idea because, Lady Gaga could be like, oh my God, I just was a part of the biggest box office flop in modern history. But I have a song that's reaching number one on the Billboard, right now. So it's like challenging for number one on Billboard right now. So it's like, am I really doing that bad? And I've got LG7, and let's focus on LG7. But of course, then it became all about Joker 2, the new Todd Phillips directed movie where Lady Gaga stars opposite Joaquin Phoenix in the sequel to the billion-dollar blockbuster film Joker that came out in 2019, 5 years earlier. Now, if you have followed me before, you will know that I was never a big fan when it was revealed 2 years ago that Lady Gaga was signing on for this project, that I was never a big proponent or fan of this idea. Now, keep in mind, I, especially at the time, but even to this day, am not a huge comic book movie person. Not a big comic book movie guy. I have gotten into Marvel a little bit in recent years, but only the good stuff. I'm trying to leave the rest. And there's definitely at least 50% of Marvel content that, is just absolute crap. But that's not even touching DC. I don't really dip my toe at all into the DC world. And if I would, it would probably be like a Superman type thing, not something super dark and gritty like a Joker movie. Now, I never saw the 2019 Joker film, but I heard quite a bit about it. I remember when it came out, there was some discourse being, percolating that this movie may not actually be in the best interest of, propagating a good role model for young men to see themselves in a character who so sadistically and ceremoniously enacts violence against those who have wronged him. And there was definitely an undercurrent or an ideation around this that this was maybe fueling men more jaded towards law enforcement or following rules, and maybe like towards women, and at worst maybe turning them into school shooters. I mean, there was a real discourse around like this potentially being a very harmful kind of movie, which interestingly enough, coming off of that, Joker 2 sounds like it is actually trying to course correct, possibly too much, and why so many people are not enjoying this sequel, Folie à Deux, which means a shared delusion, which is, I think, very interesting. There's a lot to dissect here, so I do want to share my thoughts, even though I know this is mostly about Disease. We have to talk about Joker. I mean, clearly, Lady Gaga spent 2 years of her life pouring herself into the character of Harley Quinn, and she, really was living and breathing. They really hoped that this film was going to make a ton of money, just like the first Joker did back in 2019. But they also very much hoped that this would be a critical darling, that this would be a film that the critics would revere, and that potentially Lady Gaga would get an Oscar nomination for her supporting actress bid. Although at first we thought she would be lead because we thought Harley was going to be a co-lead to Joaquin's Joker. And then we found out that Lady Gaga has far less screen time than I think any of us were hoping or expecting, and that made us realize it's going to be only in supporting. Well, unfortunately, now that Joker 2 is out, we can all kiss goodbye Lady Gaga's Oscar chances in 2025. That will not be materializing. It didn't materialize either for House of Gucci, which I was upset about. I thought, I'll get to that. But, definitely not this time around. Not for Joaquin Phoenix either. He won Best Actor in 2019 for that as well. which is pretty crazy to think about. I mean, Joker got like several wins, I believe, that night, not just nominations, but I know Joaquin won Best Actor. Boy, the cultural capital that this sequel completely destroyed in both the sense of the box office and critical acclaim is just astounding. I don't know if we've had a movie fall from grace from a sequel like this ever in Hollywood, at least one that is in this much of the spotlight. It really is like the biggest disaster in modern Hollywood, I think. And I think, unfortunately, Lady Gaga being attached to that is, I don't want to say I told you so, but there's a part of me that keeps kind of coming back to Gaga. I didn't think this was a good idea. Maybe you should try something, I don't know, that doesn't have all this controversy attached to it. Maybe you shouldn't try and put yourself into the comic book space where most men are going to be sort of wanting you to play a different kind of Harley Quinn than I think that you're more comfortable playing, and where bringing music in is going to turn off a lot of comic book fans. I will say off the bat, I know that it was not Lady Gaga's decision to make Joker 2 a musical. That was something that Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix both decided. And they decided to cast Lady Gaga after making that decision. But still, if I were Lady Gaga, I would be thinking, is this the smartest idea? Is this the smartest idea? I really don't want to turn this video into blaming Lady Gaga for the failure of Joker 2, because I really feel for her. I think that Lady Gaga is a victim of the men around the movie deciding to, particularly Todd Phillips, just completely, almost use her in a way where she thought she was going to be a part of something that ended up being completely different than I think what she, or possibly even Joaquin, anticipated. The final product of the film, after it had been edited down, turned into something that I don't think either of them really recognized. And I think it's apparent when you can see Gaga talking about the movie that there's something about the way she's answering the questions that she was surprised by the final cuts of the film, but not necessarily in a good way. I think there's some regret attached for sure. But of course, I don't want to cry over spilled milk. Everything's about learning and growing, and Hollywood's a tough business. Hollywood's a tough business. But this is only Lady Gaga's third feature-length movie and her third time acting in a major feature Hollywood film, her fourth if you count her stint on American Horror Story, which I also did not watch. American Horror Story is too gory for me. I tried getting into it, couldn't get into it. But I have seen, of course, A Star is Born. I reviewed it on this channel, had glowing things to say about that. And then I did see House of Gucci, and I actually thought House of Gucci was actually a pretty solid film. I do think Lady Gaga's performance was the highlight of it. But I don't actually think the movie was as terrible as the critics said it was. I thoroughly enjoyed it as a slice of, kind of interesting thriller biopic with some comedic angles. But of course, Lady Gaga did steal the show, and I was upset that she didn't get the Oscar nomination. I wouldn't have necessarily given her the win, but I would have definitely nominated her. But yes, Joker 2, this movie, unfortunately, is going to cast a really long shadow on the careers of so many people involved. And I really fear for Lady Gaga, in her film career, is probably going to have to pivot and, kind of go back to maybe slightly lower budget, maybe more indie kind of roles, maybe streaming roles on a streaming service. I don't know. There's others who have provided a better kind of idea of where the roadmap for her post Joker is going to take her. But everyone agrees that she should focus on the music. And she did. I mean, she decided to create a companion album to Joker 2 that was released a week before the official soundtrack for the album came alongside the theatrical release of the movie, which was called Harlequin. And this was an album that featured mostly cover songs, covers of songs of American jazz standards, something that, everyone was like, Tony Bennett would smile down upon her upon this project, even though he might not have agreed with some of the musical choices she made on some of the songs. This was definitely, again, an album for the people who love the jazzier side of Lady Gaga. And unfortunately, I think it was something that a lot of her fans who have been very patient for, waiting for a pop return, Chromatica was almost 5 years ago. Hard to believe, I know. Um, Four and a half, if we're being fair. I think that at this point, Lady Gaga fans were like, "Oh, Harlequin's nice," but that LG7 October, release date, when's that coming? That's a little bit more what we're, that's what we really care about. This is cute, but when's the actual, main entree coming? This is just a little appetizer. I had a feeling that she was going to put out a companion album. Everyone talked about how Beyonce put out The Gift for The Lion King as a companion album, and people were like, well, where's Joker 2's The Gift? Well, here it is, except this was not a visual project. There was not even a full music video. There was just a little promotional video of her singing one of my favorite cover songs on the record, The Joker, aptly named, uh, being having her kind of wander around the Louvre. Shout out to The Joker is a song from a 1964 musical called The Roar of the Grease Paint. But I am familiar from it all. Shout out to every Kath and Kim fan out there. If anyone watches Kath and Kim on Netflix, highly recommend. It's a banger Australian comedy. There's a rendition sung by one of the leads, Gina Riley, of the song. And so, of course, when I heard Lady Gaga's rendition, it made me think, oh my gosh, it's the Kath and Kim intro song. And I just got really excited about that. It's a really good song, but it already had so much familiarity for me that I think that's why it's elevated a little bit. Because the only other song that I had heard before is Oh and the Saints, which is a traditional Black spiritual Christian hymn. If I'm not mistaken, there are only two original songs on the record. Folie à Deux, which is an homage to the title of Joker, and Happy Mistake, which was written alongside Blood Pop. And the rest are all, like I said, covers spanning, the gambit of 20th century jazz and musical theater. Some other highlights for me would be That's Entertainment from the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer musical The Bandwagon, Close to You, a song by Burt Bacharach and Hal David, and Good Morning, which was originally performed by Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney in 1939. Again, a very, tap your feet, jazz hands type numbers here. And so again, I mean, it's a perfectly, for what it is, it's a perfectly innocuous, addition to Lady Gaga's catalog of covering jazz standards. I would definitely say that at this point, I'd like to see Lady Gaga work on her own original jazz compositions. That's why I think Folie à Deux is quite an interesting number for that reason. But Happy Mistake is the showstopper. There's such raw and exposed vocals on this one, with just a wistful guitar. It's something that could have easily fit on Joanne. It could have easily been attached to A Star Is Born. It has that thematic, crowd-pleasing, explosive chorus. And her performance that she did, I believe it was on Jimmy Fallon. Correct me if I was on another Tonight Show. I always get those mixed up. That was a truly phenomenal performance where her vocals had never sounded stronger. And of course, that was on the eve of the worldwide premiere of Joker 2. The Rotten Tomatoes score outside of Venice was already lower than the Rotten Tomatoes score for the first Joker film. However, the Rotten Tomatoes score for the first Joker film was never nearly as high as the audience score or the general RT score that was, submitted by that can be opened up once the film is out to the public. Critics were always a little harsher on Joker than the general public, but there was already, off of the get-go from the Venice premiere, there was sort of like this is not going well. There was like rumors about an ending that was very controversial. I have, heard spoilers about the film. I'm not going to spoil it in this in case you haven't seen it and you still want to. Theaters, and it came out less than a month ago. It's actually on digital now, which is really, really sad when you think about, the trajectory this film was supposed to have in theaters. The fact that it was rushed to digital in 3 weeks is mind-bogglingly bad. But that RT score kept dropping, and it was like, wow, this is really bombing. Like this is actually bombing. And people are going to troll. It's hard to keep integrity with some of these, but the audience score was just absolutely abysmal. It ended up having one of the worst ratings for a comic book movie of all time. Now, I think, I don't follow comic book movies like that, but I know for a fact that there are worse comic book movies. I mean, I've heard about the infamous Madam Web that came out last fall. So it's very unfortunate that I think that there is a level, because of subverted expectation, that people are reacting to this film so negatively when it's not nearly as bad as the 30 percentile like scoring that it's getting, uh, you know um, very much below F grade, is indicating. I saw a Quentin Tarantino quote recently that I did think kind of surmised what Todd Phillips was doing the best with this film, which is that Todd Phillips himself was kind of proving himself to be the ultimate Joker, by taking a much beloved original film and turning it on its head and sort of giving the middle finger to the audience of the first film. What I find so interesting is I was fully going into this film expecting to potentially not like it because it was going to continue to allude to themes from the first film, which I know I've heard defenses for. I'm a little softer on my stance after hearing more about the original film over time. I wouldn't go so far as to say that this film was like it should never have been released, things like that. But I still side eye the original film for, the violence, for the sort of the the way in which I worry about the way young men are becoming radicalized today, and the incels. There's something that scares me a little bit about making content that could in any way, shape, or form give them fuel. And I was fully prepared to go into Joker 2 thinking, yeah, Lady Gaga, like, why did you have to attach yourself to something this problematic? But actually, the movie was instead a big FU to all of the incels who liked the first film. I'm not saying everyone who liked the first film is an incel. I'm sorry, I'm taking this a little too far. This is not a safe space for comic book fans. I am sorry. I'm just not into this stuff. If I like superhero stuff, I like it when it's like magic and like galactic stuff and like lightsabers. I know that's not superhero, that's Star Wars. But you know what I mean? I prefer my superhero movies to be like Guardians of the Galaxy and like Doctor Strange and like mythical magic. I've been really loving Agatha all along. That's actually my first Marvel TV show I've ever watched, and I've been really enjoying it. I like my sort of more magical superhero stuff. I'm not so into the gritty, on the street fighting, violence, blood, and guts stuff. So this is not a safe place for that. I'm sorry for critique from me. But the fact that this movie ended up completely, tarnishing the idea of Joaquin Phoenix's character, who was actually named Arthur Fleck. It's always interesting being named Arthur, seeing another prominent Arthur in media. It's not very often. But the character of Arthur Fleck was, kind of completely pilloried in this sequel, and made to look very pitiful. And I actually think, looking at the reviews and people who have, honestly tried to give a good analysis of the film, I actually kind of like some of the choices that were made. I think I'm still probably not going to watch the movie. Never say never, but probably not. But some of the choices that are being made, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. But I can understand why this is not at all appealing to fans of the first film or to most comic book movie goers. So at the end of the day, I'm still going to join in with the people I thought I wasn't aligned with who said this movie sucks, because I'm just so happy to see it fail. I'm sorry. I think that Lady Gaga wasted 2 years working on this movie when she should have been working on other things. And it unfortunately is going to prove to be a waste. I mean, I know that's harsh, but there has been a ton written about how catastrophically horrible this movie went over. I mean, it is just this movie completely tanked. And, other movies will get bad reviews, but no one expected them to be good. This movie had so much going for it that it could have been. And I saw the trailers. I thought, you know what? These musical sequences, the cinematography, this could still be really beautiful. One thing I can't knock is apparently it has amazing cinematography. And I am a cinematography girl. So that may lead me into it enough, but the musical element is also apparently so dogs down, it brings down the film to a screeching halt in a way that musicals absolutely should not do. That it is so disjointed from the other narratives of the parts of the movie that, when it starts going, you're just like, oh, they're singing, please stop. That it doesn't look good for Joaquin or Gaga to be in this situation. And so people are going to, unfortunately, really resent Lady Gaga being a part of this because they're going to think, of course, she has to sing because she sang in A Star is Born. She usually sings when she's in a movie. And even if that's not what her original idea was, she's just going off what the director and the screenwriters were telling her to do. Of course she wanted to play into her wheelhouse and her talent. I will say, I think she sounds much better on Harlequin than she does on the actual recorded, like Joker 2 soundtrack versions of all of these songs. But that's also because there were a lot of live recordings done for that soundtrack, and she's purposely singing a different way. It's not very theatrical. It's very subdued, emotional. There's a difference to the tonality, and that's understandable. But from what I've seen, the musical numbers just do not really seem to serve much of a purpose, especially for how many there are. If there was just maybe one moment in the film where Arthur had this sort of delirium where he was going through a musical sequence, because my understanding is that all the musical sequences are imagined in his head, then that would have been fine. But it's interspersed throughout the entire film for the most part, and it just really apparently just completely disjoints the flow. People aren't happy with how little screen time Lady Gaga got. There were so many iconic photo shoots that were shown and scenes that were shot that we all saw teased on social media that never were in the final film. I feel for her. She probably thought she was going to have a bigger presence in the film. It's all in all really unfortunate. And then Lady Gaga went silent. We didn't hear from her for 3 weeks, and it started to get, I think, a lot of little monsters really nervous because I'm going to be completely honest with you. I genuinely believe that if Lady Gaga had not herself revealed on Instagram that the lead single for LG7 was to come this month, she would have postponed it because I think she felt as though this was not the intention plan. The plan was to ride the hype of Joker to give a spooky Halloween season, cherry on top, and keep her name in the headlines in the positive way. And instead, unfortunately, the headlines have not been very positive, and the social media reaction. A lot of critics will agree that she is one of the highlights. I mean, she is probably one of the stronger parts, along with the cinematography, one of the stronger parts of the movie. She definitely is the only person attached to it, acting wise, who has a 1 in a million chance of getting an Oscar nomination. But it's not happening. It's not happening after how this went down. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I feel for her. I think she's been really going through it, and I think that she was potentially going to be doing a little bit more teasing and promoting of Disease when she started teasing it a week ago. We all were very relieved, but a part of me does wonder, would she have liked to have delayed this? Probably, knowing her. But, she felt if she did that, this would be the last straw with her fans. I mean, the Chromatica Ball film and how long that took to come out was already kind of stretching the limits of the tolerance and patience of Little Monsters. And of course, Little Monsters have been clamoring for Pop Gaga back, and more in particular, dark Pop Gaga, because the samples of some of the songs we got at the Olympics and what has been teased by some of the producers and certain outlets have all teased a much more industrial, dark electronic pop record. And that is something that, is very reminiscent of Born This Way, which is my favorite Lady Gaga record. And I was just like, this is too good to be true. we're in for possibly one of the most creatively interesting and challenging projects I think Lady Gaga has made, at least since art pop. But, I think Born This Way was a more successful version of what art pop was. But I still think art pop was extremely audacious and expansive in a way I want a Lady Gaga record to be. I felt Chromatica was audacious in concept, but in execution fell very flat. People blame COVID. I think that she used that as an excuse to just not do very much. There definitely could have been at least one or two more music videos. COVID didn't last that entire, 2 years that she could have done something with Chromatica. I do feel it was underutilized. And even with the music, I don't exactly feel a lot of the music matches the sort of edgier, futuristic sounds that, was being teased by some of the artwork. But with that being said, I'm very excited because Disease is what we've been waiting for. I think it's what most Little Monsters have been waiting for a long time. This is definitely my favorite Lady Gaga lead single since Born This Way, which, Born This Way is 13 years ago. It's really emotional to think about because I was a senior in high school when Born This Way came out, and I'll never forget when that lead single came out and then the music video. Everyone was like, where's the music video? Why didn't it come out the day of release? If you look at Gaga's history, she has always released the music video a week or two after the lead single. The only time she didn't do that was in 2020 with Stupid Love, but you have to remember that Stupid Love had leaked like a full month before its release. It was absolutely crazy. One of the most amazing things about this era is we are not getting any leaks. There were definitely a ton of AI snippets floating around, but the actual product was kept locked and safe. And I think a lot of that has to do with her having a new team behind her. And Michael Polanski, who is her new potentially husband, but definitely new fiance. They might have actually recently married, according to some reports. I think has something to do with that. He is doing a much better job at securing her work. But it's also, believe it or not, he is a credit to her returning to her pop roots. Apparently, Michael Polanski really egged her on for that. I think it's kind of sad that Lady Gaga didn't feel motivated to make pop music like that herself, and that she needed her romantic partner to bring her back into that space. That worries me a little bit because it makes me think that Lady Gaga's doing this, but her heart's not fully in it anymore, that this isn't really who she is anymore. She is much more happy singing jazz standards at the piano or acting in film, maybe even singing country music. But, I don't know. It's tough. I mean, I'm happy that we're getting this new music. There's a lot of stuff that's going down on social media, Little Monsters cannibalizing themselves, saying, why isn't she promoting this more? She didn't acknowledge it initially, and it took 2 days, which had some people worried. But then she finally did. And we just got the music video. As of filming, it premiered a couple hours ago. So I'm really glad I waited to film this video because now I have the music video to talk about as well. And boy, is there so much to talk about. Disease is such an exciting return. It is produced by Circuit and Watt. There are no more tears to cry. I heard you begging for life, running out of medicine. You're worse than you've ever been. There's a strain to her vocals, which is so reminiscent of that earlier growly kind of vocal she did on Born This Way. Screaming for me, baby, like you're gonna die, poison on the inside, I could be your antidote tonight. I could play the doctor, I can cure your disease. If you were a sinner, I could make you believe. Lay you down like 1, 2, 3, eyes roll back in ecstasy. I can smell your sickness, I can cure your disease. I think it's very interesting that she has a song called The Cure that now has a sister song, although it sounds very different in sonic elements, song called Disease. In the music video, I love the almost like she's vomiting at the beginning of the song. Like there's a little bit of that, ew, like in Judas. Like this beat is so edgy, it's so dark, it's gross, but in a good way. And that oozes into the production of this track. I mean, it is heavy industrial electropop, and it is exactly what Lady Gaga was doing so stellar, running so high with Born This Way, and even on the Fame Monster. This song could have fit on the Fame Monster. It's got elements that fit in with some of those songs. And I really, as a millennial gay who grew up on that stuff in high school, it's just like, oh, we weren't sure if this day was ever going to come. And the music video does not disappoint. It seems like the haute couture, Gaga is in full force with the outfits, with the makeup. It's grungy, it's gritty, it's horror, it's gothic. I mean, this is going to be a dark record. I'm getting a lot of monochrome black, like high contrast, leather, Born This Way vibes. I mean, it's like chewed up cigarettes and black lipstick on the teeth. It's very very jaded, punk, and it's always going to be high fashion. And in the music video, it's like there's, iterations of herself. She's run over by a car. I, kind of view the dressed up version of herself, the glammed up version of herself as her own depression. And the, part her running away from the car is trying to escape her depression. She takes the mask off and she realizes it's her doing this to herself. And then the walls close in on, oh, that's a really cool effect. I was very shook by that. And everything about, the way she's using her body, the movements, it's so evocative of how the kind of energy that she used to have in her music videos that we didn't really see as much of in the more polished choreography that wasn't quite as jerky and sort of inspired by horror elements of Chromatica. Chromatica was, of course, a little bit more bubblegum, and this is definitely like, edgier, raw, or more gruesome. And more intense. And so this whole project is probably going to be a wild roller coaster. And I'm really excited for all the production elements that we're probably going to get, because Blood Pop didn't really do it for me. His sound got stale. You could hear it throughout the whole project. And so I'm hoping that she's working with a bunch of different producers, that LG7, if it does actually come in February, which I think it will, really delivers the Born This Way follow-up I've always wanted. I mean, it'll be different. I'm not expecting a complete retread of Born This Way or Art Pop or The Fame Monster, but there's probably going to be the closest elements of those records embedded in here. There might be some Joanne elements as well. That's fine. There will be some ballads, I'm sure. Born This Way had country ballads. Didn't have a problem with those. But the cornucopia is what's really fascinating about Gaga's projects, all the different kind of avenues she's exploring. But I am just absolutely floored by this comeback. I mean, this is too good to be true. I'm so excited to see this era take off. I wonder, people are worried about its charting position. Die With a Smile is an incredible song, as I mentioned earlier. But this is, at the end of the day, a little bit more of what I'm about. Die With a Smile is something I think is going to be very forgettable for me in the long run. It's chasing the pop, adult contemporary pop radio, and it'll do fine. It did amazing. Bruno collabs always do pretty good. So, I don't think it's entirely Bruno that's carrying that song, though. And let's focus on LG7. I think that Lady Gaga just, needs to kind of just focus on moving forward. It's a shame. I know she wanted Joker to possibly have an awards campaign. It's a shame, but I don't know. I don't know. I was just sitting back like, damn, this movie really flopped. I cannot believe it. This movie really didn't go out how I thought it would. I thought that at the very least, even if the fanboys of the first film hated it, the critics would like it, but the critics didn't even like it for the most part. They weren't quite as harsh, but the critics still didn't think it was very good. And it didn't even make that much money. It's not like even many people were going to see it to see how bad it was. I mean, it's astonishing. I mean, this movie just crossed 200 million worldwide, and it costs double that to make. I mean, it's the budget was insanely high for this, probably way too high. But yeah, overall, Lady Gaga's had quite a bounce, quite a rocky last couple months. Let's hope things start to steady out as we kind of channel and focus inward here. What are your thoughts on all of these songs? Die with a Smile, Harlequin, and of course Disease. And if you've seen the Joker movie, care to chime in your thoughts again? I'm sorry if I'm a little biased against movies like that. I just am, but those kind of gritty comic book movies, street level comic. I'm actually really interested in Joker if you take out the context of Joker. And it sounds like that's really what the movie was. Todd Phillips wanted to make a movie about a man with mental illness who started killing people and then realized that, he needed to face consequences for his actions. I think that that is something really interesting if it hadn't been tied up in the musical aspects and the whole DC universe. And so I think that that would have made a more interesting movie, and it wouldn't have upset so many people because the expectation wouldn't have been what it was. So it's a fascinating case study in making a movie that just on all the quadrants just flops. But at the end of the day, art is subjective, and I think Joaquin and Lady Gaga all view this as a work of art, and it's not going to please everyone. One other thing I do just have to add is I have to add this. I know this video is about Lady Gaga, but because it ties into Joker 2, and I know this isn't Lady Gaga's fault, but another reason why I'm very sour to Joker 2 is the news of what Joaquin Phoenix has been doing in the industry for not just recently, but in many years of his career, where he, takes on a project and then drops last minute without any very reasonable explanation. For those who don't know, he was supposed to star in a movie that he was producing himself, that he had casted himself in the lead for, a homosexual love story, that he canceled 5 days before shooting was to begin, leaving everyone in the crew, everyone who had built the sets, all of the producers, everyone in the lurch, everyone out of work, no time to recast, to reschedule everything. Completely blew up this entire project. And it was his own idea. And he completely just sabotaged so much work. And that kind of blatant disregard for, it's not like he had a medical reason. I think it's been admitted that it wasn't medical. It was mental. He needed it for mental health reasons. Well, I think it was just him being a diva, like he's been in the past, and dropping out of projects last minute for whatever reason. And I don't know, it doesn't leave a good taste. Doesn't leave a good taste in the mouth. So Joaquin, I don't know, as a gay man too, I'm like, what were you trying to do here? You couldn't handle it when push comes to shove, doing intimate scenes with another man, yet you were happy to cast yourself in that role. It's just bizarre. I have a lot of questions. And I feel like he could better clear it up, but he hasn't. He's chosen to let it become this narrative that we don't really know an end to. We don't have a satisfying answer for, which I think is only going to hurt him. His answers so far have been terrible. And so he needs to stop being evasive and own up to what he did. So that's a whole other issue that I have with any Joaquin Phoenix project moving forward. So there's that. But anywho, very excited for LG7, and let's focus on the positives. And yeah, Joker 2, it seemed like it was probably a folie à deux, or à trois, if we consider, I'm talking about Todd Phillips and Joaquin, to create that movie in the first place. Whoops. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful, blessed day. Peace, love, and light. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.